Welcome back to RFL. We're continuing our conversation now on stop and frisk. And when we left off, the congressman was telling us about his experience as a police chief. And I asked the question, if crime had been a bigger problem, would he have thought twice about maybe going ahead with policies like stop and frisk? And so my question is it worth it? If it can be proven, and this is controversial, this is not guaranteed that stop and frisk actually reduces crime. But if somebody could concretely come out and say it does, is it worth what people would say is the trampling of people's rights to make that happen? Is that a fair trade?
Okay, I'm not going to pretend to be, I'm not going to pretend to have the gravitas as the other side of the table. And this is my gut and my opinion.
Tell the judges
you yielded your time. So I must come at it just from my gut and from a street level here. And that is that, you know, look, if it helps, then yes, it's absolutely worth it. And I guess, you know, the notion of it being reasonable or unreasonable is if the crime is being committed 80–90% black and Hispanic, well, then if the population is so much weighted in that direction, well, who else are you going to be stopping and frisking?
But doesn't that say that basically the probable cause is you're black or Hispanic in that case?
I don't think so.
That's been the problem with it. I mean, they come up with pretextual justifications, and I read Schindler's most recent opinion. Overwhelmingly, there are these generic cliches: furtive movements, high crime area, suspicious bulge, and in the vast majority of cases, nothing pans out.
And
so it has to be reasonable not only in the execution.
I'm glad you said suspicious bulge. Yeah. And 90% of young African American and Latino men, you could say that at any given time of the day. Now, I really do lecture young men of color about, guys, you can't play into the stereotype. You can't make law enforcement's job harder by walking around with the hoodies on your head. I'm scared of you. You know, for the first time in my life, I'm not going as far as Geraldo, because Geraldo was sensationalizing it for ratings. But I had an experience recently where I was getting gas at 1:30 in the morning, and for the first time in my life, I'm almost embarrassed to admit, I saw 3 young black men walking up, and I said, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. But you cannot say that stop and frisk is a good policy, that you know, well, let's look at the results, and it doesn't matter what happens in between.
May I submit
and let me just make this final point.
Sure.
Because, no offense, gentlemen, none of you 3 are up on the wall with your hands up spread eagle. It's very easy to criticize when you're not the ones, and I don't mean to make this personal.
No, it's okay.
When you're not, because as a teenager growing up in the Bronx,
you know,
I know about stop and frisk.
In that vein, and I can see that instantly, of course. In that vein, though, I'm wondering if we're not making a cop-out on said young men, because, you know, is the answer to now say, well, let's just stop it. Let's stop the stop and frisk. Let's now make a possession of small amounts legal, as opposed to saying, can we once and for all get into this inner city and look and actually finally, instead of stop paying a lip service, instead of throwing crumbs at these inner city youth and these people, actually get in and fix the problems and get our inner city populations once and for all upwardly mobile, empower them, and stop making them perpetual victims.
All you have to do is figure out what the problems are, how to fix the problems, how to get the money to fix the problems, how to get the political will to fix the problems. I'm just saying it's not easy.
It's a persistent victim status, which I think is part of the problem, and hence we got to look at the liberals.
Well, I don't think anybody's talking about getting rid of the program altogether. What we're trying to talk about, I think, is what is reasonable and what's unreasonable. Yeah. I mean, Don makes a very good point. None of us have experienced that, although I was a Caucasian living in Asia, so there are certain dimensions to the problem that I understand. But racial profiling is a real problem, and I think we have to be aware that, once again, this policy could encourage it, and it's not a good thing to encourage.
I just want to jump in. I'm sorry, because we're running out of time. Okay. But if this was instead of Mayors Giuliani and Bloomberg, if this was Mayor Dinkins, and this was happening in predominantly white neighborhoods,
it wouldn't happen under Dinkins, because Dinkins, with his police commissioner, the second black police commissioner of the city, emphasized community policing, where you have an officer that knows the community. Big difference.
But you know where I'm going with this. If it was on a federal level, and if it was President Obama and Attorney General Holder, and it was happening in white neighborhoods, if it was a black power structure.
That's a bad hypothetical, because it would never happen.
Well, it's happening with Muslims. We're having the same debate, and lawsuits are being filed on the basis of the same profiling. Suppose it's terrorism. Is it more justified in that
circumstance? Is it not a
circumstance?
Disproportionate number of Muslims committing the terrorist acts?
It is.
So it's like I wonder if we're not going to be putting ourselves at risk for the reason that we don't want to hurt people's feelings.
The reasonable suspicion standard is the lowest standard known in law. All you have to do is articulate something that passes the laugh test. They're not even doing that. It's just an indiscriminate dragnet policy.
I know you're short on time. I want to ask you in the panel this question, because this is a dilemma that I face. When I encounter young black men, teenagers, my son's age, young Latino men, and they say to me, Mr. Carter, last week the police threw me up on the wall, went through my briefcase, went through my book bag, one had a loaded gun. As a black man who's been in the community for years, what am I to say to these young men? What do I say? We're completely powerless to act on this. How do I respond when they're turning to me for the answer and I don't know what to tell them?
Well, but you can always say life is not fair. Life is not fair, and sometimes unfair things happen. But under our Constitution, we have certain rights. We have certain rights, and we should exercise those rights. And if we feel those rights are being violated, we need to step forward and fight for them, not with violence, but with words and with the law.
But in the hood, people believe the Constitution doesn't apply.
I would love to keep this going. Unfortunately, we're just hard up against a break here. This is an issue we're going to revisit all week. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by one of the authors of The Crime Numbers Game. That's a book on the NYPD's efforts to reform the department and cut crime, an effort the authors allege has gone way off course. And also, you at home, a critical part of our conversations here. We want to hear from you on this issue. Head over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Richard French Live. You can also tweet us at Rich French Live to tell us what you are thinking about Stop and Frisk.